Hello, I'm Rob from That Little Box. In this video I'm going to show you how to use fade cues in Qlab to fade audio up and down. We're also going to look at the auto continue, auto follow and pre-wait parameters for the cues that we create. If anything doesn't make sense, then just take a look at the last video introducing audio cues and get yourself up to speed. We don't make Qlab, that's figure 53, but we do love it and people all over the world use That Little Box products to control their Qlab workspaces. I'm going to start with an empty workspace in the free version of Qlab 4 available online. First, let's make sure that we have our output routing set correctly in Settings and Audio, and we'll set the output patch to whatever audio device we're using. I'm just going to use my Mac's built-in output. Now let's create an audio cue by dragging in a file from Finder. This cue should play using the default levels set by Qlab. So imagine we're going to use this as walk-on music for a comedian. We want the music to start nice and loud, and then as they arrive on stage we want it to fade all the way out over 5 or 10 seconds. We could do that with a fader on a mixing desk and not even touch Qlab programming, but I'd suggest that automating things like this is probably a good idea, and if we didn't, this video would be redundant. First thing we need to do is set a level for the track to fade from, the unfaded level of the track. I want this to be quite loud for the comics walk-in, so I'm going to give it a bit of a boost. Now in order to fade that out, we need to create a fade cue. We do this by clicking on the fade cue logo in the toolbar. In Qlab, a fade cue changes a value over time. That value can be various things, but at the moment we're just interested in the master output level of our track. When we create a fade cue, we can see that we have a problem. There's a little red cross next to the cue's logo, and this tells us that the cue is broken. If we hover our mouse over the cross, it tells us why. This cue has no target. It's a fade, but what's it fading? We need to tell Qlab which audio cue we want the fade to act on. Fixing this is really simple. Just drag the cue we want to fade onto the fade cue itself, and we can see the name of the fade cue will change to tell us the name of the cue it's fading, and the target will show the cue's number. But we still have that little red cross. This time, if we hover our mouse over it, we get the message, no fade parameters have been enabled. Qlab knows that we have a fade cue, and it knows that we want to fade our walk-in music, but that's it. It doesn't know whether we want to fade it up or fade it down, fade the master, fade the left, fade the right, and by how much. In this case, we want to fade our track out to nothing, so we hit the fade cue and select audio levels. Notice everything is grayed out because nothing is enabled. This is what the warning told us. If we click on the master fader, it will turn yellow to tell us that it's been enabled. Now let's drag it all the way down to -infinity. Before we go and test out our fade cue, there's a really useful option here that we can select for situations like ours when we want to fade a track out and not bring it back up later. Right now, once our fade is complete, the track will play to the end at 0 volume. If you hit the stop target when done checkbox, then once the fade's been completed, Qlab will stop the track from playing. Apart from freeing up computer resources, this means that you can't accidentally fade it back up and give your comic a fright a minute into their set. So now let's test our cue. It works, but it's a bit abrupt. We want to make sure our imaginary comedian is nice and comfortable on stage in position before they lose their walk-on music. So let's change the fade out time to 10 seconds. We can do that in a couple of places, but I'm going to do it in the shape inspector. While we're here, another thing we might want to consider is our fade shape. At the moment it's an S-shaped curve. Other defaults available in Qlab are parametric curves and linear curves, and you can have a listen to those to see how they're different. But let's create a custom one. What if our comic comes out and straight away starts talking to the crowd? He's going to be shouting over the music. How about we change it so that the music quickly fades down to a bed level, and then after he's established on stage, goes all the way out. Perfect. We've got a nice two-stage fade out over 10 seconds. We could be even more flexible with this if we wanted to by making it 2 cues, one that fades to the first level and another that fades to 0, but I think I like our solution for now. So that's fading out. What about fading in? Our imaginary comic wants to finish his set with a slow build of music under his final gag. It keeps going to play him off. We're going to use the same piece of music, so I'm just going to copy and paste it and rename it play off. Just like with a fade out, the first thing we need to do is set our unfaded level. As we're fading up from nothing, this is going to be negative infinity. Notice how all I want to change is the master level, so that's all I'm setting to negative infinity. Left and right are both staying at 0. Now we create and target our fade cue and set the level we want the track to reach. Again, we only want to change the master, so we only activate the master. We're going to have a nice loud volume, as hopefully there'll be some applause to get over. The comic has told us that from his cue to start the music to him walking off is normally about 30 seconds, so we can set the fade time to 30 seconds. This time I'll set it in the cue window. Let's test it. Okay, it works, and I'm quite happy with the shape, but the problem is that we have to hit the go button twice, once to start the track and a second time to start the fade. We really want to just start them both at the same time. As with so much in Qlab, there are a few different ways to do this, but for now let's just come over to the end of our audio cue and make this cue auto continue. This means that as soon as this cue is fired, it will tell the next cue in the stack to fire as well. This little column at the end of the cue list is really important. It can be used to set each cue to auto continue, where when fired it automatically fires the next cue, or auto follow, where when finished it automatically fires the next cue. One important thing to note is that the hotkey to toggle between these behaviors is C, and on a keyboard C is right above the spacebar, the hotkey for go. Now, at least during programming you're going to be using the spacebar a lot, so this is a really common source of problems when it's hit accidentally. Anyway, back to our playoff music. Now if we fire it, the fade goes at the same time. We're nearly there, but I think we've still got one problem. Once this fade finishes, the track's going to be really loud, and it's going to stay really loud even after the applause has died away. I think we need to bring it down a bit once the main applause is over, say 10 seconds after the comic leaves the stage. To do this, let's create a second fade cue with play off as the target and set it to fade to a lower level over the default 3 seconds. Now we can set our first fade in cue to auto follow onto our second fade in cue with a pre-wait time of 10 seconds. Pre-wait time is just what it sounds like. It's the time that the cue waits from when it's asked to fire to when it actually fires. This can be used to build up time-based automation across a cue. Now when we fire our cue, we should get a nice 2-stage fade. I'm going to let this play out all the way just to check that it's working properly. As we've seen, we don't always have to fade in or out all the way, and we don't always have to fade the master. One really common use of fades is positioning sounds on stage. You could use a single fade cue to bring up the left and down the right hand channels at the same time to allow a car to pass across stage, for example. Using this really simple tool, we can create very complex audio cues that move in both level and space. There are other ways to fade audio in Qlab, but we'll cover that in another video. For now, I hope you've enjoyed this little video from that little box.